A number of Criterion Games' early projects put players in the driver's seat of racing titles, high-octane adventures that helped the Guildford UK-based studio slowly build a reputation for itself. However, it was 2001's Burnout that launched the development group into true stardom. Instead of simulating refined driving experiences, Criterion focused on delivering an action-based thrill ride from start to finish, complete with the seminal crash mode that boasted over-the-top crashing sequences. The studio later decided to inject a similar level of extravagant action into the then PC-oriented first-person shooter genre, introducing console players on PS2 and the original Xbox to Hollywood-style shootouts in the often overlooked yet transformative Black. According to producer Jeremy Chubb, Black targeted what should have always rested at the core of any shooter: guns and destruction. It accomplished as much and more to great effect, due in large part to a well-crafted blend of detailed gun models and the ruination they caused once fired into deformable environments. Publisher Electronic Arts and the storied Criterion crew had high ambitions for the shooter, and let said ambitions spearhead much of the marketing ahead of launch. Some critics and players later argued that Criterion overpromised with regards to what Black had to offer. Meanwhile, others appreciated the project for what it did provide: a first-person shooter whose graphical detail, destructibility, and blockbuster movie-inspired gameplay attempted to push the genre forward. And since few games have followed Black's lead, there remains a contingent of fans who remember the chaos and hold out hope for another round. This is the history of Black. This video has been brought to you in part by NordVPN. NordVPN allows you to secure your internet data with next-generation encryption. Access geo-restricted video games from all over the globe and protect yourself from DDoS attacks if need be. With NordVPN's lightning-fast servers, your internet speed won't be sacrificed for security either. Browsing the web or playing games online is just as fast as before. But now you'll be able to enjoy both with the peace of mind that NordVPN services offer you. NordVPN is available on all the devices and browsers you're connected to the internet with. So whether you're browsing the web or playing games on a PC, console, or mobile phone, you'll be assured that your privacy and bandwidth are protected in equal measure. Regardless of what system you're on, NordVPN's integrated apps will make the process of shielding your online behavior easier than ever before, allowing you to spend your time on the web carefree as quickly as possible. This month, NordVPN has an amazing Black Friday deal featuring a 73% discount on their 2-year plan, in addition to 1 month for free. And with their 30-day money-back guarantee, you'll be able to try NordVPN entirely without risk. Be sure to use our unique link and code in the description to claim these discounts and support the channel.
In Burnout, the only style you need is driving like a complete maniac. There's no points for driving with Daisy.
Executive producer Alex Ward divulged in a 2005 Eurogamer interview that Black's incubation within Criterion Games began during the development of the original Burnout. He elaborated further in a post-mortem about the shooter's production, explaining how his personal desire to build a shooter bubbled to the surface after visiting a gun range in Las Vegas. Visceral visuals such as muzzle flashes, recoil, and the bouncing of the shell casings especially took Ward aback, leading him to ponder why games had neglected to truly capture the thrill of firing a gun outside of dry and tactical experiences. He felt that even modern films came up short in terms of recreating the impactful sound of a weapon firing and connecting with its target. Thus began the developer's interest in crafting a new type of shooter, one wherein players could tear in-game environments apart while unloading rounds from weapons that felt like nothing else on the market. Ahead of Burnout's E3 2001 showing, Ward and several Criterion engineers brainstormed the kind of shooter the team would execute on PlayStation 2's hardware. An FPS title seemed the easiest path to success, considering the proprietary renderware technology used across all Criterion projects. These embryonic planning stages launched Ward into full-scale research during Burnout's production on what internally became known as the Criterion Shooting Project. The executive producer directed his attention toward nailing down a setting first. Since North America had begun to rival Japan with respect to the global market's interest in games, the developer thought long and hard about what would perform well with North American audiences. Historical conflicts like World War II seemed a promising backdrop, though ideas of this nature quickly lost their luster due to the slower rate at which World War II guns fired. Early on, then, Ward chose Russia as a potential starting point for the overarching plot, believing the country's role as enemy would play well in America given past tensions. He specifically envisioned a first-person shooter akin to Medal of Honor, in which the audio finesse and atmosphere of the franchise's first two entries would be replicated against a Russian backdrop. As a result, research on underground cities, suitcase nukes, and an abandoned Russian airbase all fueled nascent concepts for Black. Ward even contemplated using the Russian space program in Star City to build an alternate version of GoldenEye mixed with 1979's Moonraker. When backpack bombs and various Russian-centric narrative devices started materializing across other media, Metal Gear Solid 2 included, Ward thought it best to shelve the topic for the time being. And the project itself soon thereafter lost steam as the studio shifted gears towards Burnout 2: Point of Impact. The game, later titled Black, wouldn't enter full production until January 2005.
Double kill, multi-kill, kill.
Throughout the early 2000s, the general consensus pointed to mouse and keyboard as the preferred way to play first-person shooters. Time Splitters on PS2 and Halo Combat Evolved on Xbox seemed exceptions to the rule, but Criterion believed there still existed room for improvement on all fronts. Thus, the studio approached its debut shooter with three central concepts in mind. The idea that players could have fun in an empty room with only a gun acted as one such guiding principle. Positioning the gun as the star of the experience served as another. Lastly, Criterion hoped Black would reinvigorate shooters the same way Burnout had revitalized racers. Producer Jeremy Chubb told IGN that in pursuit of these aspirations, the development team concentrated on capturing the dramatic flair of Hollywood films with the exaggerated explosions and ridiculous character animations that games often ignored. Black's action most notably borrowed from blockbusters of the 80s and 90s, specifically honing in on the destruction featured in The Terminator, Die Hard, True Lies, and The Matrix. These films provided a frame of reference during the preliminary phases, wherein designers used movie scenes and storyboards as a basis for level design. Ultimately, the goal centered on building environments that made each combat encounter feel varied and interesting, a notion further bolstered by Criterion's investment in destructibility. Chubb noted in an interview with GameSpot that shooters of the era lacked the detail necessary to fully immerse players. Enemy combatants killed by gunshots in other games merely fell over, whereas shooting someone in Black made them spin like a stuntman, while firing at a wall in another FPS title may have resulted in a decent-looking effect. The same action in Black saw dust filling the air, sparks flying off metal, and bits of cement chipping from concrete. The Eastern European setting allowed Criterion to take advantage of its meticulous attention to detail, as each in-game locale harbored materials where Black's destruction effects shined. For example, shootouts in a junkyard replete with metal left behind remnants that looked nothing like the end of battles in a forest level. Criterion's efforts in conveying the minutiae of film-esque firefights also extended to gun design. Artist Chris Healy argued that because weapons in FPS games occupied a considerable amount of screen real estate, firearms in Black required treatment akin to any main character. Ahead of the title's E3 2004 reveal, the team decided to appoint someone as the designated gun guy who would dedicate their work to the arsenal. Up until that point, Healy had spent pre-production on level pre-visualization and testbed world building. His love of military paraphernalia drew him to the gun role, though. Staff brought in BB guns to assist Healy in his quest for weapons to animate and showcase in Black's E3 teaser trailer. But senior designer Stuart Black's purchase of replicas from an online shop was what established a baseline for the design team. The G36 assault rifle received its 3D model first. Throughout the next several months, Criterion collected an impressive 21 replica guns, which, along with their respective attachments, played an integral part in building Black's armaments. Once the recreations entered the game world, the developers pieced together their final looks, each gun fabricated with a texture budget, similar to the player's car in Burnout. This level of fidelity gave Black an edge over the competition. Healy didn't let it go to waste either. The artist in him elected to accentuate the way light behaves on the surface of weapons. Small touches like wear and tear were added as well, illustrating a grimy appearance as opposed to the new gun glow that weapons bore in countless shooters. Needless to say, extraordinary effort went into ensuring the object in the user's frontmost view never looked dull. But because Criterion neglected to inject other facets of the experience with similarly fine details, the final product faltered in some areas. Unveiled during E3 2004 at a behind-closed-doors presentation for media members, Black impressed all who saw it at first glance with a demo of destructible objects and environments, but little else. Black stayed under the radar throughout the rest of the year due to its pre-production status. However, EA's roughly $48 million purchase of the studio and the release of Burnout 3 Takedown kept Criterion flowing in and out of the news cycle. When the FPS project resurfaced at E3 2005, it managed to impress once again, with members of the press gushing about the title's so-called gun porn and sensationalized explosions. Story particulars lacked the same enthusiasm from developers and critics alike, possibly explained by reports that Black allegedly spent much of its development without an overarching plot. Still, the basic premise of Black Ops operative Jack Keller eliminating an American traitor in a Russian war zone proved enough to draw audiences into the promise of Black's explosive gameplay. Criterion abandoned the usual tenets of Black operations, though, preferring to let overt action supersede covert ops and stealth-based gameplay. A desire to translate the tension and emotion of Hollywood-style shootouts took precedent after all, which seemed reflected in comments executive producer Alex Ward made while speaking with Eurogamer. According to Ward, the crew aimed to do a few things very well instead of poorly checking off several different boxes. A strong single-player campaign thus sat center stage, while supplemental content like multiplayer never made the cut. The producer added that Halo Combat Evolved's success, despite the absence of online multiplayer offerings, proved that audiences cared only for quality experiences. But when asked about Criterion's underdeveloped storytelling chops, Ward argued few games at the time featured a respectable narrative. That air of confidence pervaded nearly every interview and even extended into the post-mortem pieces that developers penned long after the title hit store shelves. After a brief delay out of late 2005 and into February 2006 because of Burnout 3's arduous final months, Black launched and quickly proved Criterion earned the confidence it so often exuded. Despite the mundane gameplay, absence of multiplayer, and the short and uninspiring story campaign, critics and players found plenty to enjoy in Black. Frenetic gunplay and destructible environments, heightened by bombastic moment-to-moment action, guaranteed the otherwise forgettable romp lingered in the minds of those who longed for another over-the-top, finely tuned shooter. Criterion tried to deliver just that with a hopeful sequel. According to Unseen64, the studio and EA once laid the groundwork for a Black franchise, giving way to the studio briefly conceptualizing a subsequent entry. These efforts reportedly commenced in April 2005, as the companies hired external artists to assist with big-picture ideas. Anonymously, one contract artist disclosed the dispute that brewed about the IP's future. One proposal envisioned Black 2 as a direct follow-up to the events of its predecessor. Unseen64's sources claimed a separate pitch suggested a self-contained adventure comprised of co-op mechanics, though character and narrative-related specifics never came to fruition. The sequel as a whole underwent various fits and starts. Preliminary work screeched to a halt months before the original's February 2006 rollout, and though Criterion entered pre-production on a second Black installment shortly after launch, creative disputes between studio leads and EA brought the project to another standstill in May 2006. Senior designer Stuart Black corroborated the claims in a 2010 IGN interview, divulging that he worked on Black 2 for 3 months before departing Criterion over disagreements with Electronic Arts. Yet, it seemed neither Criterion nor EA was willing to give up on the promising new IP. Sometime after Stuart Black's exit, the cooperative idea reemerged and, again, proceeded through a fleeting period of pre-production. A quote attributed to Warren Jensen, EA's chief financial and administrative officer, offered a ray of hope in November 2006, as he supposedly teased a next-generation version of Black in EA's quarterly review. This reference marked the project's first and only semi-public mention from the publisher. People familiar with the matter told Unseen64 a lack of direction culminated in Electronic Arts ultimately pulling the plug outright. To the delight of many a fan, Stuart Black revived the DNA of the property by helming development on Codemasters' Body Count, another first-person adventure grounded in the premise of refreshing shooter experiences. Much of the core team behind Black participated in Body Count's creation, aiming to fill the void left by the latter's spiritual predecessor. Interestingly, Black's prioritization of guns and destruction subtly morphed into an emphasis on the bullet and its impact on the world and body count. Unfortunately, neither of these high-octane ventures ever made it past introductory outings. As a consequence, there remains a void in the genre, still in need of filling. Thank you for watching. We'd like to take this time to thank, by name, the generous patrons who have pledged to our Hall of Fame reward tier. Maktoum Saeed Al Maktoum, Paul Cousino, and those currently subscribed to our producer reward tier. Dari Rap Sigurdsson, EmuMovies.com, Lame Game Man, Milkshake, Schizo Lingvo. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to our channel and backing us on Patreon.